Hey, what's up YouTube? Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change the rear brake shoes in your 2010 Corolla LE. Now, some Corollas have the rear disc brakes. This one has the rear drum brakes. And a lot of people get intimidated when they see drum brakes and maybe haven't done them before. It's really not that hard, and I'll show you how easy it is to change those shoes out. Now, we're not going to change the drum, but if you do need to change the drum, that's really simple. Just replace it with the new one when you put the drum back on. Now, the first thing you need to do is make sure that the parking brake is not on. Make sure that this will spin freely like it does. If the parking brake is on, this is not going to come off. Now, a lot of times still the drum will be stuck on here because it will somewhat rust to the hub right here. And you might need to grab a little Tanya Harding like this and give it a few whacks or taps right here at the face, trying to break that loose. Now, if that doesn't work, you can also grab a couple bolts. These are M8 by 1.25, and you see these little threaded holes in the drum. You can just screw these in, and that will act as like a fourth screw, and it will press that drum off of the hub. Sometimes the shoes and the drum are so worn out that the shoes have embedded themselves into the drum and created a lip on the inside here. Now, if that's the case, you're going to have to adjust them inward so that you can take this drum off. That's kind of hard to do, but if you get a little flashlight and come around here to the back, you see this little slot right here. Normally there's a little rubber plug in here, and this one's missing, but normally you can just pull that little rubber plug out and get a little flashlight in there, and you might be able to see the little star wheel. Now, what you want to do is turn that star wheel with a flathead screwdriver or a brake adjuster tool and adjust those shoes inward enough to where you can get the drum off. Now, in our case, the drum is not stuck, and so we're just going to pull this straight off. Now, before we get started, I'm just going to grab some brake cleaner and just knock all the dust off of this, and I've got some cardboard down here to catch that dust. Just be careful when you're spraying this, because if it comes out at full strength and high pressure, you can just create a really big dust cloud of this brake dust, and it's really bad for you to breathe that. Give yourself some distance, or be careful when you're spraying this that you're not creating too much of a dust cloud. All right, now the first thing I like to do is take this little horseshoe clip and pry that apart. I used to just take this off and do this on the bench, but a lot of times you can get this done while it's still on the vehicle. Just a little screwdriver or a pry bar works pretty well. Just trying to open this horseshoe clip up. See, like that. And then once you have it open, it'll just come right off. There we go. Now, a lot of brake kits don't come with replacements, so you might have to hang on to this. Our kit did come with new ones. Now, you see how this spring right here is under tension? That's the next spring that we're going to take off. But before we try to take that off, I'm going to thread this star wheel adjuster in so that it's a little bit closer together, and it's going to be a little bit easier to pull off. There's a little tab right here that locks onto that star wheel adjuster that you have to push in. I'm pushing that in with one screwdriver, and then I'm going to turn the star wheel with another. And this is kind of what you would have to do from behind that little hole in the back if you have to turn these in order to take them off. Easy to do once you have the drum off. It's really hard to do through that little opening. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is grab onto this spring and pull it off of this shoe here so that we can take this adjuster with this spring out. Now, you can use some vice grips for this, but sometimes they're a little bulky to get in there. I've got this tool that I've had for many, many years, and this is a brake spring tool. Now, you can see it has this little notch, and that's designed to grab on or catch the spring like so. And then we just thread this down or tighten this threaded rod in that little sleeve. And now it's like I have this little handle, and I can pull that and have a little bit more leverage and a little bit more control. I really like this brake spring tool. I've had it for many, many years. I'll get a link to a similar one in the description for you. I'm just going to use my hand here to support this shoe while I pull this spring off. Just like that. And then I can unthread that and remove the tool. Now, you want to be careful of this wheel cylinder, or be mindful of that. Don't just go yanking on one shoe, because it'll pull that and can pop out the wheel cylinder. But we can separate this just a little bit, just like so. And now we can take out this adjuster and the spring. Just pull it out of that little opening right there. Now, I'm going to get this all cleaned up before we put this back on, but just make sure that you take note to the orientation. The longer side of the spring goes forward on this car. Now we need to take off this hold down spring off of the front shoe, and there is also a special tool for that. It's this right here. It's just a brake hold down spring tool, and I've had this again for many, many years. I like this big cutout because it allows you to see. What you do is just put your hand on the back to hold this little rod from moving. It looks like a little nail, and then you just push that and turn it until that lines up and it comes right off. We're gonna have to take this piece off too. Now this shoe can come out. Now we still have this spring on the back. We don't have to take that off in order to take the shoe off. That's just holding on this little tab right here that locks onto that star wheel adjuster. But if we drop this down, we do need to take off this bottom spring. That's easy to do. Just take note as to the orientation. Now we can take off the rear shoe using the same tool here. You can use vice grips or needle nose pliers as long as you can push in and turn. That's all that really matters. This just makes it go a lot quicker. All right, now the rear shoe is the one that's on this parking brake lever, but I already took off the horseshoe clip, so just push that in and just take this off. Now I do want to point out in some of my older videos, and what I used to do is just take off this lever and I would just pull the little spring and just pop this cable out. And I used to take this parking brake arm together with the shoe over to the vise to take off that horseshoe clip and swap it over to the new shoe. But I have to give a shout out to Jim, the car guy. I saw that he takes off this horseshoe clip before taking off the shoe or before taking off the hold down springs. And I thought that that would be a little bit easier, so that's how I'm doing it here. Just cleaning up the backing plate a little bit better here. Now before I put the new shoes on, I'm gonna hit this backing plate at all these little contact points. You see these little pads where it's been rubbing? We're gonna hit that with some of this brake grease. This is caliper grease, synthetic caliper grease, and it's gonna help quiet that down and prevent some of the wear that was going on here on the backing plate. All right, now the front shoe here, like I said, we still have this spring attached along with this little plate right here, this little arm that locks into that star wheel adjuster. So now we can take this spring off. I'm just gonna use the same brake spring tool. You could also use vice grips, but I'm just gonna unhook this from the shoe and take it off just like that. And you see this lever, it comes off of this rod that is integrated on this brake shoe. This is the front brake shoe that has this rod on the back. So what you need to do is grab the new brake shoe that has that same rod and line this up and install it just like that. Now when you're replacing your brakes on both sides and you reach into the box, these all look the same. All of the brake shoes look the same, but they're not the same. The rear brake shoe does not have the rod here, that little rod. So make sure that you don't accidentally put the front brake shoe on the rear of the other side or the first side while you're doing this. It's just gonna cost you a lot more work. But this is the rear and this is the front. And we can put this spring back on just like it was. Just hooks onto that little plate or lever and just hook it right into that hole on the shoe. And we'll take our brake spring tool right off. So this is the front brake shoe ready to go back on. Now I'm actually gonna put the rear brake shoe on first just because it was the last one that we took off, but I just wanted to show you that we needed to transfer that spring and that little lever or arm onto the front brake shoe so that that's ready to go on. Now before I put this one on, I'm also gonna put a little bit of this brake grease here at this little part right here that goes into the wheel cylinder and at the little base right here, because that's also gonna rub on this little metal pivot point. I guess I could put a little bit of brake grease on that too on either side. Now just be mindful to not get a lot of grease on the friction material of the brake shoe, and if you do, just clean it off with some brake cleaner. Now what I'm gonna do is try to get this little brake lever attached and put our horseshoe clip in place before I put it up. I think it's gonna be a little bit easier to line this up. And I'm just gonna use some needle nose pliers and close that horseshoe. This is the new one that our kit came with. You just want to close it until those are touching. And now we can put this one up where it goes and put your finger on the back so that you can line up this rod right here. And then we're going to put our hold down spring on. First start with the base plate there. And you want to just take note to the orientation. See how it's horizontal? So we'll get this one ready in the horizontal fashion as well. And there you see we turned it so that it's 90 degrees to that slot, and that is on now. Now you want to make sure that the shoe is behind this little plate here on the bottom in the back. And just again, be mindful of your brake wheel cylinder. Don't push that out. Just be really careful while you're doing this. All right, now we can put our bottom spring on at the same time we put our front shoe on. So we're just gonna hook that on right here and then hook it onto the front brake shoe and then tuck the spring underneath and then bring this one around and up. And again, we're just gonna use our finger in the back, apply a little bit of pressure on that little rod that needs to come through this hole right here. We'll get the little base plate on first and then the hold down spring. And then when I put this plate on, just gonna line that up and I'm gonna use that brake spring tool. Just push it and turn it a quarter turn. So now it's perpendicular to the slot. Now we don't have to worry about pulling these shoes in just yet. They're actually not even touching the wheel cylinder. That's gonna give us a little bit more room to reinstall this spring. But first I'm gonna get this cleaned up. Now you see this little cap, I like to get a little bit of grease in there. You see it's got a little bit of dried grease in there. Let's just make sure we put a little bit more of this synthetic caliper grease in there. That seems to do the trick. Now I'm backing this out so that I can clean these threads as well. We don't want to get too carried away with putting too much grease on there because it'll have a hard time turning in or compressing. Now we're just going to put a little dab of grease on these threads. Just don't want to use too much because that grease is not going to compress and then this will get stuck or it won't want to turn all the way in, but this feels pretty good right there. I'm turning it all the way in because it just makes it easier to hook the spring back on. And remember this part right here, pop that on. It spins nice and smooth, so that's good. And then we can put our adjuster back in. You just want to line this up in the notches. And I'm going to start by hooking the spring on the back. So I'm just kind of trying to slide this spring all the way over. Just going to use this brake spring tool to push it all the way in. There we go. Now I'm going to hook that brake spring tool onto this side of the spring. We just need to shift this shoe over like that so that it's now lined up in the wheel cylinder like it should be. And then this one as well. Now I'm going to use the screwdriver to push that little adjuster tab back so that I can slide this over because otherwise the star wheel is hitting it. So I'm just going to push on that just a little bit and try to slide this in a little bit more. Now this one is kind of fighting me because this little part does not want to go into the notch, but here's another trick I'm going to use right here. I'm going to use the other little screwdriver to pull that spring while I do it. And then I'm going to use a little screwdriver to push in on that tab. There we go. That's all it took. I just have to wiggle this screwdriver out while I push in on that spring. And there we go. And take off that brake spring tool and it's on. Now here you do want to make sure that your shoes are concentric to the backing plate. Otherwise you're going to have a really hard time putting the drum back on. Now another thing you might want to do, especially if you live in a rusty area, is clean the surface of this hub with a wire wheel and coat it with some anti-seize so that the drum won't get stuck on there. Just make sure you use some safety glasses if you're going to use a wire wheel on a drill. And I'm just going to brush a little bit of this copper anti-seize on the surface of that hub. A little goes a long way with this stuff. Now try not to get any on the lug studs. If you do, just wipe it off. Mostly focused around the center here. That seems to be where the drums and rotors will get stuck the most. Now on this car, we're going to reuse the drum. If you're getting a new drum, make sure that you do spray it down with some brake cleaner or wipe out the interior surface. We're going to do that here with the old drum as well. Now the new drums are packed in oil to prevent rusting while it's sitting on the shelf, but it's important that you wipe that off, especially off of the friction surface. All right, now when we put this on, this is of course going to be pretty loose still. Now that's way too loose. It spins way too easily. What we need to do is adjust this outward so that it will push those shoes out enough to where they start to grab that drum. Now you can do this after the drum is on through the back, but it's a lot easier to get to from the front. That's still too loose. What I'm looking for is about 1 revolution without the wheel on, or 2 revolutions with the wheel on. All right, let's give that a try. I'm happy with that. Now you can see we're about 1 full revolution with the drum without the wheel on. Just spinning that drum as hard as I can. It spins about 1 full revolution and then it stops. Now the other rule of thumb that I was always taught with drum brakes is with the tire on, you should be able to spin this about 2 full revolutions before it stops. Now if it spins farther than that, you should get in through that little opening and use a brake adjuster tool like this or a flathead screwdriver and adjust that out a little bit more. Be about 2 full revolutions before it stops with the tire on. If you're testing it with just the drum, it should be about 1. I know a lot of people are intimidated when they see drum brakes and they're not used to doing them, but it is something that you can get done. It's really not that hard, but that's pretty much it. I hope you liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. And of course, I'll get a link in the description to some of the parts and tools used in the video as well. Thanks so much for watching and good luck.